Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says his country will join the G7-backed climate club to tackle global warming. Albanese, who was in Berlin on Monday, made the announcement alongside German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The climate club is a key initiative from the German leader and came into being last year. On Monday, he explained how the club could work for both Australia and Germany.
We want companies from Germany and Australia to enhance the cooperation for the production and transportation of green hydrogen. This will be an important contribution to reaching climate neutrality.
No challenge is, of course, more pressing than that posed by climate change. Australia and Germany are now united in our deep commitment to tackling climate change. And I commended Chancellor Scholz on his development of Germany's climate club and was pleased to confirm that Australia will join that high-ambition initiative.
Joining me now for more context is DW Chief Political Correspondent Nina Haase. Nina, what exactly is this climate club that Australia has signed up to?
Well, the idea comes from an American Nobel Prize winner for economy. He wrote a paper in 2015 and essentially asked for big emitters to do more to actually meet those Paris climate goals. And Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, then put this idea on the international stage, if you will, when Germany had the G7 presidency a year and a half ago. And then the G7, all those big emitters, they signed up to that climate club in December last year. This is, of course, the group of the most industrialized countries, and they have the idea to reduce CO2 emissions, especially from big industry, heavy industry. So make their industry greener and make these countries actually meet those Paris goals. So the idea is to also avoid a situation where those countries that do set themselves ambitious goals receive unfair competition from countries with low environmental standards, or to have industry move production to those countries. It's a club, but it is open to countries around the world, no matter how big or small they are.
And Chancellor Scholz was also speaking of enhancing green hydrogen cooperation with Australia. What is all that about?
Well, Germany wants to get rid of fossil fuels like gas, oil and coal. And Germany itself doesn't have enough wind blowing on the shores, and the sun doesn't shine all year round here, as I'm sure people who visit have noticed. So Germany is looking at setting up partnerships with countries like Australia, but also countries in South and West Africa, where there is a lot of potential for wind and solar power. And Australia, of course, plays a very crucial role for Germany because it is a stable democracy. Bilateral ties go back decades. And Germany has given itself a green hydrogen strategy. Now, the idea here is that hydrogen can become the prime energy source of the future. And if the process that turns water into hydrogen can be produced with renewable power, then, and this is cutting a very long process short, then this source of energy can be climate friendly. And for the transition period, Germany is building LNG infrastructure, but it always has the goal that one day those pipes, etc., can be used to deal with hydrogen. So one day it would be used for Germany's steel production, also for chemical processes and the transport sector. So ships and trucks, lorries can also use hydrogen to transport goods. And that is, of course, crucial for Germany, which is an export nation.
And now, besides the commitment to tackling climate change with Germany, Prime Minister Albanese also committed to deploying a Royal Australian Air Force surveillance aircraft to Germany for 6 months. Why?
Now, that was an interesting announcement that came yesterday when the Prime Minister met with Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, here in Berlin, before the Australian Prime Minister then went to Lithuania to attend the NATO Summit. So essentially there, the idea is to help protect the flow of military and humanitarian supplies into Ukraine. So the Australian aircraft will be deployed in Germany for 6 months, starting in October this year. They will protect multinational logistics hubs that supply this critical support to Ukraine. So it serves as an early warning system of any threats. The plane can alert all of Ukraine's partners if something is about to happen. Australia stressed very quickly that it will operate in European airspace, not within Ukraine or Russia or Belarus. And Australia has been criticised somewhat that it's not doing enough to support Ukraine. This is, of course, something where Australia is also saying this is not just a European conflict. This is something that potentially affects all of us around the world because it is about upholding the rule of law. This is about a small country trying to fight off an invader and upholding democracy and sovereignty.
Now, Australia isn't a member of NATO yet. Australia is attending a NATO summit. Why?
Well, Australia does have decades-long ties with NATO, with this alliance, and Australia is attending the second time. Now, last year, they also attended the summit in Madrid. And this year, interestingly, Australia is not alone from the region to attend as a visitor, essentially, from the Indo-Pacific. We're also having representatives there from Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand. So there is a bit of a give and take here. So NATO is formally an Atlantic alliance, hence the name, but it is about more than that. This is about, upholding the rule of law. NATO's member states are very strong partners for Ukraine. Australia wants to be kept in the loop and essentially demonstrate that it is also condemning Russia's invasion, that it is supporting Ukraine, and that it does not come from NATO as an alliance, this support for Ukraine. This comes from countries around the world that wants to actually see Ukraine withhold this pressure from Russia.
It's interesting because NATO, as you correctly point out, is an Atlantic organization, an Atlantic alliance, but it's also looking at the Indo-Pacific. I mean, you look at Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, visiting South Korea and Japan earlier in the year in January. So what is behind that?
Well, last year in NATO's strategic concept, for the very first time, NATO actually mentioned the Indo-Pacific as well as a region where developments can directly affect Euro-Atlantic security, which is why NATO is putting more of a focus on strengthening existing partnerships, but also developing new ones with partners in that region. And of course, NATO does see China's ambitions and policies in that region as a major challenge. And they addressed in that paper the growing cooperation between China and Russia, and that is something that NATO sees as a threat to the established rules-based international order.
We'll have to leave it there for the time being, but thanks so much for joining us on this very important subject. DW Chief Political Correspondent Nina Haza, thanks so much.